every one of these guys have been charged with murder or attempted murder. You can imagine the stress that they're under, guilty or innocent, right? And everybody else around them is in the same boat, and they'll fight at a drop of a hat. There's just so much anger and pinned up inside of them. But when you or me are on the pickleball court, we don't think about anything else other than hitting that ball over the net.
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Michaela Pereira, a pickleball enthusiast, at least when my knee doctor isn't listening. Look, I love the game. I did come to it late, however. My guest today, Roger BelAir, was an early adopter of the sport. I think he's been playing for some 14 years, coaching as well. But this retired financial advisor did something very, very special with his love of the game. Roger envisioned pickleball as a means of teaching life skills to incarcerated people in prison. Roger BelAir is the first person in the country to introduce pickleball into jails and prisons, from Rikers Island to New York to San Quentin here in California. And Roger joins me now. Roger, what a joy to meet you, my friend, my fellow pickleball enthusiast.
Okay, it's great to meet you too, and I'm really looking forward to our session today.
Well, look, I'm fascinated that you would make the connection with this game that has been a craze around the nation and around the world
Yeah.
with incarcerated people. What made you put these two things together?
Well, sometimes life goes off in a direction you just don't expect. All right. And
True.
I came from a professional speaking background. And so I started teaching the game because I loved it. And I like to teach it partly because I like to tell people what to do.
You're funny, Roger.
My wife and I are watching 60 Minutes one night, and they had a segment. Leslie Stahl had a segment on Cook County Jail in Chicago. Boy, Michaela, you can imagine the problems they have back there. 70 major gangs. And it was on Sheriff Tom Dart, and the guys are just hanging out, playing cards, that type of thing. And I said to her, they ought to be playing pickleball.
Why pickleball and why them?
The words just kind of popped out of my mouth because what I call us people that are addicted to this is we drank the Kool-Aid, right?
It's true.
And I said, they'd learn life skills, they'd learn things like learning from mistakes and thinking about consequences. And my wife, she just kind of looked at me and we've been married a long time. She nodded. And then I said, I'm going to write Sheriff Dart a letter and tell him exactly what I think. I'll go back there. I'll teach the game. I'll bring all the equipment, and I'll do it on my own dime.
Okay, your wife must have really thought you were having some sort of breakdown or something.
She said, your intentions are great, but don't be disappointed if you don't hear from him.
And he responded?
Well, he got that letter, and he'd never heard of pickleball. Just like a lot of people, put the thing on the side of his desk. But that night, what happened is he mentioned it to his family over dinner. He just got 2 or 3 kids. Got this letter, something about balls and pickles. Never heard of it. 10-year-old daughter puts her hands on her hips and says, Dad, I'll tell you about pickleball.
That's incredible. His 10-year-old spoke truth to power, and he took a second look at your letter.
Yeah, and he did. He did some research and said, well, it's legit, and this guy's not going to charge me anything. And so,
Were you surprised that he responded?
I do an awful lot of off-the-wall things. My wife was surprised. She didn't expect an answer back, but I was earnest. I'll use that word. I was earnest, and I believed in it, and they contacted me, and that started the whole thing.
So you travel out to Chicago, you go to Cook County Jail, and you bring presumably pickleballs and paddles
That's right.
and a net
Yeah,
and
portable nets.
a hope and a prayer. How did it go?
Well, we drive up to the facility, and this thing is huge. It's like the size of 72 football fields.
Oh, geez.
I mean, I'd never seen anything like it, out here. And I, go through clearance, and I find myself in front of about 25 guys that have been charged with either murder or attempted murder.
Doesn't get more real than that.
My heart, Michaela, went right up to my throat. And I thought I'd start by telling them just, a little bit about the start on Bainbridge Island.
The start of pickleball, how it came to be. Right.
And they weren't not interested. Arms are crossed. They're looking around the room. I couldn't get their attention. And I didn't, I, I thought of my wife's comment. I thought of my dog. I didn't know if I'd be on an airplane going back to Seattle.
So what changed?
Well, not knowing what to do, I says, well, let's hit the courts. I mean, it wasn't working what I was doing. So I bet within 15 minutes, I just gave them a paddle, sent them out the court. They turned into these people that had no interest in what I had to say. Well, I call it like third graders on a playground. They're just laughing, they're giggling.
I
All of a
love
sudden,
that.
they're listening to every single word I said.
Wow, you broke through. But it wasn't actually you that broke through, the game itself broke through, I suppose.
Absolutely. And playing pickleball like you do, you know that there's something magical about this sport. And
There is, and okay, have you figured out how to explain it? Because I can't necessarily articulate what it is. I explained to my friends that when I would go out to play, it it is that actual word play, because we adults, we don't have time, we don't make space for, we think it's frivolous, the idea of even play at all. And I think we
yeah,
humans need play. Where I'm out in the sun, I'm out in a community with because there's a communal spirit to the game of pickleball, and I'm moving my body around. It feels pretty good.
boy, you got to figure it out. But here, I was very fortunate to get to be good friends with one of the three founders, Barney McCallum.
The founders of the game.
Founders of the game. The other 2 guys have passed away, all right? But, he was fascinated by criminal justice, so he was really intrigued with what I was doing. So I visit Barney once a month, and he told me once, he says, "There's no game like pickleball. Pickleball is the most social sport ever created." And think about that. When we go to the courts, you can go for a half hour, half a day, and you put your paddle down, you play for 15 minutes. There's a lot of laughter, like a comedy club. And then you go to the sidelines and you get all these interactions, all these conversations, right?
They just are there for the love of the sport.
And the next time you go back, some of them are there, and that's I think the number one factor about what makes pickleball so special.
So, okay, so back to Cook County,
Okay,
you can't necessarily have community. I mean, they have, look, it's a communal living situation inside a prison or a jail, but
right.
they're not going to have the same kind of spirit necessarily. So, what is it about the game that translates well to a group that is facing incarceration?
Every one of these guys have been charged with murder or attempted murder. You can imagine the stress that they're under, guilty or innocent, right? And everybody else around them is in the same boat, and they'll fight at a drop of a hat. There's just so much anger and pinned up inside of them. But when you or me are on the pickleball court, we don't think about anything else other than hitting that ball over the net. I think in that environment, it's a total mental release.
It's a bit of escapism.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have problems, but think about when you go out to the courts. You don't think about, this problem or that problem or a doctor's appointment next week. All you do is you laugh, you have fun, you hit the ball over the net. So that's my theory. But that's a great question.
I don't think that your theory is at all flawed, because it is true. You have to anytime you have to do something, if you focus on something else, let's say I'm not great about getting a needle, right? Like I didn't
Yeah,
I knew I had to get a COVID shot or a
yeah,
flu
I
shot.
I
I don't
understand.
love the act of getting a needle, but if I can take myself to a little beach in Mexico mentally,
Right.
or doing an activity that I like mentally, if you can escape that, it makes that thing not so painful. So maybe the idea of escaping for an hour to hit this little electric yellow ball over the fence, or the
Net.
net, allows them to escape to a place safely.
Well, obviously, I agree. And it's true for all of us, but it's especially true when you're in that type of environment that guilty or innocent, you got all that stress. You're waiting to go in front of the judge. You have no idea what the rest of your life's going to look like, and there's just continuous. There's so much tension you can cut it with a knife.
And by the way, look, we're not making a value judgment about guilt or innocence or right or wrong, but it's allowing these humans to have a very human thing, right? A little bit of exercise in the sun. You talk about the life skills. I want you to dig into that a little bit more because the executive function of pickleball may not be the first thing that comes to mind for people.
There's life skills like teamwork, that I was maybe thinking of or learning from mistakes. But here's what happened, and I didn't necessarily expect this, is like at Cook County, disciplinary problems are down.
Interesting.
The guys want to play so much that if they get into trouble, they can't play.
They don't want to lose the privilege of being able to play.
Well, I didn't expect that, but I know that they love it just like the rest of us. Pickleball is unique, is that, I like to say you can learn the game after breakfast, and lunch you're pretty good, right?
Look, by the way, I am not boastful at all. I think I have a decent amount of athleticism. I played sports all through high school and a little bit intramurally in college, and I've stayed active. And I think I have decent eye-hand coordination. By no means am I going to be playing in any tournament, celebrity or otherwise. But you get a proficiency after a while when you get comfortable with the way the ball hits the racket, et cetera, and moves through the air because it's different. For those that don't know, and I'm showing it to the camera, it's almost like a wiffle ball in a
It is a wiffle ball.
it is a wiffle ball.
That's how they started. On day one, what happened is they set up the nets over on Bainbridge Island, and because the kids were going out there to play, and then all of a sudden they can't find the birdie. Well, a guy, he was 13 at Dickie Green's, walking down the street with a wiffle ball and a plastic bat, and that was the start of the game.
Come on. I didn't realize it was so I had no idea it was so sort of haphazard, sort of spontaneous as that. That's really amazing.
Well, that's the way. Joe Pressure's out playing golf, comes home, the kids are whining, I'm bored, and whatever. He says, "Get out back and play some badminton." So they set everything up. Well, they grabbed, that wiffle ball, and it wasn't working that well with the badminton racket. So they went down to my friend Barney McCallum's garage, got some ping pong paddles, and that's how the game started.
That's remarkable, and it just shows you what can come out of just, making do with what you have. So you're in Cook County, they invite you back, you start doing more sessions there?
Yeah, I've been back there 3 times, and, I went from old guy to either bro or dude at the end of the day, and everybody I taught loved it, and
Wait, that's what they were calling you? They were calling you the old
oh,
guy or
yeah,
dude?
OG, old guy, yeah, and by definition, I am,
You fair point.
but if they really like you, you're a bro or a dude, right? And they were so appreciative of, and it's not, well, let's face it, it's not me, it's pickleball. It's, I just happen to introduce it. But this is an interesting story. I've been back to 3 times. The 3rd time was a sports reporter for USA Today. Wrote up the story. And I thought it went great. And he calls me up a couple days later and says, "Roger, I don't know how to tell you this, but it's not going to be on the sports page."
Oh, and you were so disappointed.
Oh, disappointed. I told a nosy neighbor, I told the guys at the gym, I'm gonna have egg on my face. I mean,
Aw.
well, right? This is really big time to be on the sports. And
Yeah,
he chuckled
sure.
and he said, "The editors read the story. They're gonna put it on the front page of USA Today."
Ah, he tricked you. That's amazing.
In that story, they talk about disciplinary problems being down, which is wonderful. I just already mentioned that.
Yeah.
But there's a people can pull it up online if they're interested, but there's a picture of me sitting on the bench with an individual, and as that picture's taken, he's pointing out their courts. He said, "Roger, look out there." Well, God, I look out there and I see people, what I call swing and pray, S&P, hitting the ball over the net. He says, "You don't understand. You just don't understand. We have 70 major gangs in Chicago. Many of them are enemies. Prior to pickleball, some of these guys wouldn't even talk to each other. Now
Mm.
you look out there and they're playing with and against each other."
I bet he couldn't even believe it.
Well, yeah, he was in awe, but look about breaking down barriers between people when you can go from people that won't even talk to each other for whatever reason to people that will laugh together.
Who knew that it could bring people together in that way? It is community building in its best form out there, but who knew that in this way it could be such a tool for building bridges, if you will?
Absolutely.
You've grown now. I mentioned in the intro that San Quentin,
Yeah.
Rikers Island, I
Oh,
mean, these are major, institutions now have you've introduced pickleball in both of those institutions and
you
others?
know, after Chicago, I went to Rikers Island, which is the jail for New York City. As you know, they got 100,000 people to go through there every year. If you can believe it, 100,000. After I left, the deputy commissioner was so impressed, he ordered equipment for 20 courts.
That's remarkable. How did the staff take to it? Did because that's another thing that they have to either manage, put on their to-do list. Are they supportive of the programs?
Most are, that you got some old school that says, "Well, we've never done this type of thing," and whatever. But I want to talk to you about what happened in San Quentin because you said in your intro from Rikers Island to San Quentin. So I'm sitting at my desk. I get an email from the warden at San Quentin who says, "Can we have a video call?" So I did the following day. And I thought I'd start by saying, "Well, Warden, let me tell you about some of the things that's happening and the benefits." And he goes, "Roger, stop. I've done my homework. When can you be here?" San Quentin has more people on death row than any other institution in the Western Hemisphere. All right. So I'm dealing with the subordinate, the rec supervisor, and I said, any chance that the staff can participate or maybe even the warden? And he said, "We've been around for 170 years. Never has the warden participated in anything like that,
Not likely.
nor the staff." All right. But wait a couple of days. I call up the warden. I ask him the question. He says, "Let me think about it." So fingers are crossed. The day I showed up, the warden was at the net with a paddle in his hand.
Get out. That's incredible, Roger. What do you think changed? Do you think he had a 10-year-old at his house telling him about the game of pickleball?
No, he was, they're trying to make changes in California. And here's the backstory on that. This recidivism rate in this country is about 70%. I mean, that's that's terrible. Norway, by comparison, about 20%. So, Michaela, what California is doing is saying, how can we improve? How can we do things better? So they're studying Norway's system and others, and they're realizing by offering things like pickleball, for example, it brings people together, and it even brings them more together if you can get staff and inmates playing together.
Recidivism, the idea that people, once they're released from incarceration or from the criminal justice system, that they won't come back. They won't be incarcerated. And that is, when you think about 70% in the state of California.
And that's nationwide. 70% end up back in prison.
So is this just you, Roger? Are you on your own on this, or do you have some pals that are helping you out, or are you managing all of these programs solo?
Well, initially it was, but here's what's happened is being on podcasts like yours and other news articles from the Washington Post, people read about me or hear about me. They reach out and say, "I want to do what you're doing in my local community, but I have no idea where to start." And so, I've gathered the names, and then we've kind of formed a support group. And right now we have about 3 dozen people that I'm acting as mentor for around the country.
That's phenomenal. And here, retired financial guy, probably thinking he could just be I'm just thinking you could have been doing a bunch of other things, right? And look at what you're doing. Look at what you're doing. So here's the question. Um, how how do people start the game of pickleball if they are not, for those, talk like a coach right now. Somebody's heard about, they're tired of their friend Michaela yapping about this game of pickleball. What do they do? What's the first step? Should they just show up?
Take a lesson, and if you Google where to play if you're in Denver, where to play pickleball in Denver, some websites going to come up, and you're also going to say, here's a pickleball lesson. And the beauty of this thing, like I said, you can learn the game in an hour and a half, and you'll be having fun in that time. A lot of sports are I've been trying to learn golf for 40 years, all right? Yeah. So to start there, and then you just learn the basics, there's only 3 or 4 rules.
And then I suppose you can decide, is this game for me? Does my body like it? Do my knees like it? Speaking of knees, coach, you got any tips on how to protect my knees?
Yeah. Well, I've taught the game now to about 4,000 people. Isn't that shocking?
That's remarkable.
I really recommend, just getting a basic lesson, and on the knees, I imagine you use, a elastic support around your
Yeah,
knee.
I wear a neoprene sleeve on my knee, and I have some good decent court shoes that I got specifically. Is that the best?
The shoes are the most important piece of equipment, all right? Because what happens is somebody goes out with running shoes are meant to go forward, they'll catch an edge and then often fall. But the court shoes, Michaela, are for basketball, volleyball.
Racquetball, tennis, all of those things. I'll tell you this, the first time I went out to play, um, in Inglewood, California, I went down, a friend of mine took me, and I thought it was like the first day of school. I was so nervous. I was like, "All these people know what they're doing, and they're all so cool." First thing I noticed, 60% of them had a knee brace or knee support on. I was like, "These are my people." Second of all, there was a lot more gray in the temples than I expected, which made me also feel like, "These are my people." And this woman walked in at the same time as I did. Her name was Gloria, and I'll never forget. I'll shout out to Gloria. I think Gloria is 90. She's a former tennis player and gave up tennis to play pickleball. And she's out there tearing up the court. And I was like, Gloria, we're going to do this. And that was what inspired me to stay with it because I'm doing a little bit of knee rehab right now, but once my knee is back to full strength, I'm going to be back. This racket, my folks from Rockney hooked me up with this racket. I'm going to get out there on the court and hit some balls around and have some fun.
I played with a guy recently, he's 93,
Come
and I
on.
said, and he does really well. And I said, "Bob, does pickleball keep you young?" He thought for a second, he said, "Not really, Roger. What keeps me young is my 72-year-old wife."
Hey now, go ahead. I love it. He's got himself a younger woman. Listen, Roger, this has been an absolute joy to talk to you about what you have done with this chapter in your life, sharing something you love so much with people that could really benefit from some of the life skills that pickleball can teach. There are going to be people that say, "Hey, I want to know how to support, to volunteer, to start a chapter in my area." What's the best way they can get in touch with you, Roger, to help out in your effort?
Well, let me give my, email address because that's probably the
I
best
love it.
way, and I get,
Okay.
a couple of inquiries, every week, which is BelAir, and there's an extra R on the end of it, so it's BELAIRR @gmail. And
Perfect. We'll make
and
sure that it's on the screen so that
yeah, great.
anybody that's interested, sir, I salute you for sharing your love with other people, for sharing your love of pickleball with me. And maybe one day we'll actually be able to get on a court and
Oh,
play something.
that'd be great,
Wouldn't
wouldn't
that
it?
be a hoot?
Well, this has been a lot of fun, so thanks for having me on your show.
Joy was mine. Thank you so much, Roger. Keep up the great work. And for all of you out there, try it sometime. Look, don't think you're too cool for it because Roger's right. Pickleball is a very cool sport. And even though we're kind of late to the game on this conversation, I think is right on time in other ways. Thanks so much for supporting the show. Be sure to subscribe, share with a friend, and we'll see you next time.